The descent into Eden. Lucas blinked awake, his head pounding with a relentless ache. His last clear memory was of alarms blaring, warning lights flashing across the control panel, and the violent turbulence shaking his entire ship. Now he lay on the ground, surrounded by lush green foliage and thick jungle vines that were a world away from the cold, metallic interior of his craft. The acrid scent of burnt metal still lingered in the air, but mingling with it was an unfamiliar floral sweetness. Groaning, Lucas pushed himself to his feet. His body was stiff, his limbs sore, and he struggled to regain balance as vertigo hit him. Suddenly, his foot slipped, and he went tumbling down a mossy embankment, landing with a splash in a shallow pool of crystal-clear water. The shock of the cool water snapped him into full consciousness, and as he sputtered and wiped the water from his eyes, a melodic laugh echoed through the trees. Quite the dramatic entrance, a soft voice teased, lilting with a tone that was playful yet calm. Lucas turned to face the source and found himself staring at a figure who seemed to have stepped right out of a dream. She was unlike any creature he had ever encountered, a tall, slender being with shimmering skin that reflected shades of green and blue under the dappled sunlight. Her features were delicate, and her large, almond-shaped eyes gleamed with a strange, captivating light. "Do you always crash land with such style?" she asked, a smirk playing on her lips. Lucas cleared his throat, feeling a warmth rise in his cheeks. "I prefers smoother landings," usually, he replied awkwardly, realizing he was staring. She extended a hand to him, and he took it, marveling at how warm and alive she felt. "I'm Isla," she said as she helped him up. "Lucas. And thanks, Isla." He glanced around, a growing unease tightening in his chest. "You wouldn't happen to know where my ship landed, would you?" Her gaze softened with a touch of sympathy. "I saw it crash just beyond the trees. I hate to say it, but from the looks of it, it didn't fare too well." She gestured to the jungle around them, her voice light. "Welcome to Eden. I'm afraid your ship isn't going anywhere for a while." Lucas's heart sank. He was stranded on an uncharted planet with no immediate way to contact Earth. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. "Eden, huh? Guess I'm not the first person to land here." Isla chuckled, a warm, comforting sound. "You could say that, but I've been alone for quite some time." Despite his worry, Lucas found himself relaxing as they walked through the jungle together. The landscape was stunning, with emerald leaves so vibrant they almost glowed and flowers that sparkled as though dusted with stardust. Everything seemed alive and humming with energy, unlike anything he had ever seen. Isla moved gracefully, her every step a dance with the earth, and Lucas tried to keep up, his curiosity growing. "So, how did you end up here?" he asked, sidestepping a thick root and glancing over at her. Isla hesitated, a shadow flickering across her face. "I got lost, you could say," she replied. "A long time ago." Her tone suggested there was more to the story, but she didn't elaborate, and Lucas decided not to press her. As they continued, they came upon a small clearing where a simple shelter stood, woven from leaves and vines in a way that made it almost indistinguishable from the surrounding greenery. Isla stopped and turned to him. "You'll be staying here for a while, I think. So, let's get you settled." Lucas stepped into the shelter, noting its sturdiness despite its natural construction. He was about to comment when a strange chirping sound drew his attention. "What's that?" "Ah, those are the native creatures of Eden," Isla said, her eyes gleaming with amusement. "I call them sky crickets. They're harmless, but the sounds they make can be a bit unnerving at night." She handed him a piece of fruit that looked vaguely like an oversized plum. "Try this. It'll give you strength." Lucas took a cautious bite, and his eyes widened in surprise at the explosion of flavors. Sweet, tangy, with a hint of something he couldn't quite place, a taste that seemed almost magical. He felt a rush of energy, the fatigue from his crash landing dissipating. As night began to fall, Isla showed Lucas how to start a fire using local materials. His attempts were clumsy at best, earning a few laughs from Isla, but eventually, a spark caught, and flames danced to life between them. "Not bad," she said, her gaze warm as she settled beside him. "For a spaceman who's used to pressing buttons, you're learning quickly." Lucas couldn't help but smile. "I guess it's different here. Nothing like the colonies I've been to." They sat in companionable silence, the crackling fire casting soft shadows on Isla's face, highlighting her alien yet oddly familiar beauty. Lucas found himself mesmerized by her, not just for her appearance, but for the strange sense of calm and warmth she brought. He had spent years exploring the stars, but this was something new, something grounding and deeply human. "So, tell me about your world," Isla said, her voice soft. "What's it like among the stars?" Lucas looked up at the vast sky above them, the stars twinkling like tiny beacons. "It's beautiful and terrifying," he replied. "Out there, you feel so small, so insignificant, but at the same time, you realize just how much is possible. Every star is a place waiting to be explored, a new story to be told." Isla listened intently, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "It sounds like a dream," she murmured. "I've always wondered what it would be like to see other worlds." Lucas felt a pang of longing, a surprising desire to share the vastness of space with her. "Maybe one day you will," he said. "Once I get a signal out, maybe I could take you with me." A soft, mysterious smile tugged at her lips, but before she could respond, a sudden low growl echoed through the jungle. Lucas stiffened, his gaze darting toward the trees. What was that? Isla's expression grew serious. "That would be one of Eden's less friendly residents. Let's get inside." They quickly scrambled into the shelter, securing the entrance with woven vines and branches. Inside, the space was small, and Lucas was keenly aware of Isla's closeness, her shoulder brushing against his. Another growl resonated outside, but Isla didn't seem worried. Instead, she placed a reassuring hand on his arm, her touch surprisingly comforting. "They won't bother us here," she said softly. "The shelter is well hidden." Lucas exhaled, his heart rate slowing. "You seem to know a lot about this place. How long have you been here?" Isla looked away, her eyes distant. "Long enough to know the sounds of every creature," she said, but there was a sadness in her voice that Lucas couldn't ignore. "Are you trapped here?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Isla's gaze met his, her eyes reflecting a depth of emotion he couldn't quite decipher. "In a way, yes," she replied, "but I've learned to call it home." The silence hung between them, heavy with unspoken words, but Lucas didn't press her. Instead, he placed his hand over hers, giving it a gentle squeeze. "You're not alone anymore," he said softly. A smile touched her lips, and for a moment, he thought he saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. They stayed like that, close and silent, as the jungle's nocturnal symphony enveloped them, and Lucas found himself wondering not just how he would survive on this alien planet, but what mysteries he would uncover about Isla and the strange paradise she called Eden. A new day, new challenges. As dawn broke over Eden, Lucas awoke to the gentle rustling of leaves and the faint sounds of creatures stirring in the trees. The warmth of the shelter had kept him surprisingly comfortable, and the unfamiliar floral scents wafting through the air reminded him of just how far he was from the cold, mechanical world of space travel. Isla was already awake, her gaze fixed on the horizon as golden sunlight filtered through the thick jungle canopy. The soft light accentuated her ethereal features, her shimmering skin reflecting shades of green and blue, as though she were part of Eden itself. Lucas watched her silently for a moment, struck by the otherworldly beauty and quiet strength she seemed to possess. "Good morning, spaceman," she said, turning to him with a teasing smile. "Sleep well." Lucas chuckled, stretching his sore muscles. "Better than I expected, considering my recent crash landing. But I have to admit, it's a bit unsettling not having my usual controls and gadgets." Isla laughed softly. "Well, today's lesson involves no gadgets, no buttons to press, just you, nature, and a bit of patience." Ready for your first real taste of survival? Bring it on, Lucas replied, trying to sound confident despite the nervous flutter in his stomach. She handed him a makeshift spear, crafted from a long, sturdy branch with a sharpened tip. Lesson 1. Food. Eden is rich in resources, but some of them come with quirks. She gestured toward a cluster of vibrant blue flowers growing nearby. Take these, for example. They're sweet and full of energy, but they have a tendency to, well, they're a little jumpy. Lucas raised an eyebrow. Jumpy. Isla nodded, her eyes twinkling with mischief. Just try picking one. Gently. Lucas approached the flowers, carefully extending his hand to pluck one. But the moment his fingers touched the stem, the flower shot upwards, nearly smacking him in the face before disappearing into the trees. Isla burst out laughing as Lucas stumbled backward, a mix of surprise and frustration on his face. "What was that?" he asked, half amused and half exasperated. "Eden's flora has a mind of its own," she replied, still chuckling. "It takes a little finesse. Watch." Isla moved gracefully to the flower patch, extending her hand slowly and letting her fingers barely graze the petals before she plucked one smoothly. "See, it's all about the touch." Lucas tried again, this time mimicking Isla's movements, and to his surprise, he managed to hold onto a flower without it leaping out of his grasp. He sniffed it cautiously, and its scent was unlike anything he had ever encountered, sweet yet spicy, with a strange, energizing quality. They spent the morning foraging, Isla teaching him which plants were safe to eat and which ones were best avoided. Lucas found himself growing more comfortable in Eden's lush surroundings, his initial anxiety melting away as he learned to appreciate the planet's quirks and hidden beauty. With each new discovery, he felt more and more captivated by the strange world and by Isla's quiet wisdom and gentle guidance. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, they returned to the shelter with their bounty. Isla set about preparing a meal, mixing various leaves, roots, and berries in a large leaf bowl. Lucas watched her work, mesmerized by her graceful hands and the care she put into every movement. He was struck by how seamlessly she had adapted to Eden's wild environment, and he couldn't help but feel a growing admiration for her resilience. "So, Isla," he began, breaking the comfortable silence, "you've told me a little about Eden, but not much about yourself. How long have you been here?" Isla's hands stilled for a moment before she resumed mixing the ingredients. Her gaze was distant, and Lucas sensed a hint of sadness in her eyes. "Longer than I care to remember," she said softly. "Time flows differently here. I lost track of it years ago. I've seen the seasons change, creatures come and go. Eden is a beautiful place, but, well, it's also a prison in its own way." "A prison?" Lucas asked, his curiosity piqued. "Were you trapped here?" Isla hesitated, her gaze shifting to the distant mountains. "In a way, yes. I came here with others, explorers like you. But something happened. They're gone now, and I'm the only one left." Lucas felt a pang of sympathy for her loneliness. He had often felt isolated during his travels, but he always knew he had a home to return to. Isla, however, seemed truly alone, marooned in a paradise that had become her cage. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I can't imagine what that must have been like." She gave him a small, sad smile. "It's all right. I've made peace with it. Eden is my home now, and I've come to love it despite everything. But sometimes, I wonder what else might be out there." The two fell into a contemplative silence, and Lucas found himself yearning to show Isla the stars, to take her beyond Eden's borders and share the vastness of space with her. But he knew that any such dream was a long way off. First, he had to find a way to signal for help, to repair what he could of his ship, or, at the very least, to survive. As they finished their meal, Isla stood and extended her hand to him. "Come on," she said, her tone lighter. "There's something I want to show you." They ventured deeper into the jungle, following a winding path that led them through towering trees and dense undergrowth. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and blooming flowers, and strange creatures watched them curiously from the shadows. At last, they emerged onto the edge of a cliff overlooking a vast valley, where waterfalls cascaded down mossy rocks into shimmering pools below. Lucas gasped, stunned by the sheer beauty of the scene. Eden stretched out before him like a living tapestry, vibrant and wild, filled with colors he had never imagined. This is incredible," he whispered, feeling a surge of awe and gratitude. Isla smiled, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "I come here sometimes when I need to remember that, even though I'm alone, I'm part of something greater. Eden may be dangerous, but it's also alive in a way few places are." They stood together in silence, taking in the breathtaking view. For the first time since his arrival, Lucas felt a deep connection to Eden, a sense that he was meant to be here, if only for a short while. He glanced at Isla, wondering what secrets she held, what mysteries lay buried in her past. As they turned to head back to the shelter, Isla suddenly tensed, her eyes scanning the shadows. "Wait," she whispered, her tone wary. "We're not alone." Lucas froze, gripping the spear she had given him earlier. A low, guttural growl echoed from the trees, and his heart raced as a large, shadowy figure emerged from the undergrowth. The creature was unlike anything he had ever seen, massive, with muscular limbs and a thick, scaly hide that shimmered with a dull, iridescent sheen. Its eyes glowed a fierce amber, and its teeth gleamed as it bared them in a snarl. "Stay calm," Isla whispered, positioning herself between Lucas and the creature. "It's a Cyrox, a predator, but it won't attack unless we provoke it." Lucas swallowed hard, his grip tightening on the spear. "Any advice?" Isla's gaze was steady, her voice calm. "Slowly back away. Don't make any sudden movements, and whatever you do, don't look directly into its eyes. It sees that as a challenge." They inched backward, careful to avoid sudden movements. The Cyrox watched them, its muscles coiled as if ready to pounce, but it didn't move. Lucas's heart pounded as they retreated into the trees, every step a delicate balance between caution and speed. At last they were out of sight, and the growling faded into the distance. Lucas let out a shaky breath. That was intense. Isla grinned, her eyes sparkling with a mixture of relief and amusement. "Welcome to Eden," she said with a laugh. "The Cyrox is one of the more formidable creatures, but there are plenty more surprises out here." They returned to the shelter as night fell, the jungle coming alive with a symphony of sounds. Lucas settled by the fire, grateful for the warmth and security of their makeshift home. He glanced at Isla, feeling a strange mix of admiration and curiosity. "You seem so fearless," he said. "How do you do it?" She looked at him, her gaze thoughtful. "Fear is natural, Lucas, but so is courage. Being here has taught me that we're all capable of facing the unknown, of finding strength within ourselves, even when we're afraid." Her words struck a chord, and Lucas felt a newfound determination stirring within him. He didn't know what the future held, but with Isla by his side, he felt ready to face whatever challenges Eden had in store. As the fire crackled and the jungle murmured around them, he allowed himself to hope that perhaps, just perhaps, this unexpected adventure was only the beginning. Trials of trust and survival. Lucas woke to a sky painted in shades of gold and rose as dawn filtered through the canopy above. Each morning in Eden felt like a revelation. Its vibrancy, beauty, and unpredictability made every moment feel alive. Despite the hardships, Lucas was beginning to feel a strange attachment to this world. As he sat up, he noticed Isla sitting a short distance away, watching him with a serene smile. She held a small bowl made of woven leaves, filled with a strange, luminous blue liquid. "Good morning, spaceman," she said, offering him the bowl. "Here, drink this. It'll give you energy for today's challenges." He took the bowl, eyeing its contents with a mix of curiosity and caution. The liquid shimmered, and as he sipped it, he was met with a surprisingly refreshing taste, like mint and berries with a hint of something he couldn't quite place. Within moments, he felt a surge of energy coursing through him, clearing the last traces of sleep from his mind. Not bad, he said, raising an eyebrow. What's in this? Isla shrugged, her lips curling into a mysterious smile. Just a few herbs I've learned about over the years. Eden's plants have potent properties if you know how to use them. Looks like I've got a lot more to learn from you, he replied, smiling. She nodded, a spark of excitement in her eyes. Today, I thought I'd show you how to fish, Eden style. There's a river not too far from here with fish unlike anything you've seen. They set off through the dense jungle, Isla leading the way with her usual grace and ease. Lucas, still adjusting to Eden's terrain, tried to keep up, but his foot caught on a root, and he stumbled forward. Isla turned, her violet eyes gleaming with amusement. Careful, she teased. The jungle isn't as forgiving as I am. He laughed, shaking his head. Trust me, I'm trying. But Eden seems determined to keep me on my toes. The jungle soon gave way to a riverbank, the water sparkling in the sunlight. Strange, elongated fish darted below the surface, their scales gleaming with a metallic sheen. Lucas had never seen anything like them, slim and agile, moving as one like a school of sentient arrows. So, how do we catch them? He asked, watching them swim in fascination. Patience and a bit of Eden's magic, Isla replied, gesturing for him to follow her lead. She took a small, flat stone from the river, rubbed a handful of moss over it, then dipped it into the water. Almost immediately, one of the fish swam up to the stone, its large eyes locking onto her as if entranced. Isla moved slowly, letting the fish edge closer, then scooped it up with a swift motion, cradling it in her hands. See, they're drawn to the moss's scent. Lucas tried to mimic her technique, dipping a moss-covered stone into the river. But as soon as a fish approached, he grew too excited and lunged too quickly, splashing water everywhere and sending the fish darting away. Isla laughed softly, her voice warm with encouragement. Patience, Lucas. Try again, and this time let them come to you. He took a deep breath, calming his racing heart, and tried again, this time focusing on the water, waiting until a fish hovered just near enough. With a smooth motion, he scooped it out, holding the wriggling creature with a triumphant grin. Got it. They spent the morning fishing and gathering other supplies, and by midday, they had a small feast of Eden's strange yet delicious offerings laid out on a flat rock by the river. As they ate, Lucas found himself growing more comfortable, not just with Eden but with Isla herself. She was like no one he had ever met, a blend of strength and mystery, compassion and wit. Isla, he said after a while, you said you came here with others. Were they like me? Her expression softened, her gaze distant. In some ways, yes. They were explorers, seekers of knowledge and adventure. But they didn't last long here. Eden isn't a place for the unprepared, and some things here are unforgiving. Lucas felt a pang of sorrow for her loss, but he also sensed there was more to her story. Isla, you don't have to be alone anymore. When we find a way to signal for help, you can come with me. We could explore the stars together. Isla's eyes glistened, but she quickly looked away. Perhaps, she murmured, her voice barely a whisper. But Eden has become a part of me. I don't know if I could leave it behind, even if I had the chance. As they began the journey back to their shelter, a sudden loud crash echoed through the jungle, followed by the ground shaking beneath them. Lucas froze, his heart pounding. What was that? Isla's expression darkened, her gaze darting around the trees. Trouble, she replied, her voice tense. Stay close and move quietly. They crept through the underbrush, moving toward the source of the sound. Soon, they found themselves on the edge of a clearing, where a group of massive, reptilian creatures prowled around. They were twice the size of any animal Lucas had ever seen, their scaled bodies shimmering in shades of green and bronze. Sharp claws dug into the earth as they sniffed around, clearly searching for something. Those are Karex, Isla whispered, her voice barely audible. They're hunters, and they don't take kindly to intruders. Lucas swallowed, gripping the spear she had given him earlier. "What do we do?" "Stay low and move with me. If we're lucky, they won't notice us." They began to back away slowly, but as they moved, Lucas's foot slipped on a loose rock, sending it skittering down the slope with a loud clatter. One of the Karax turned, its amber eyes locking onto them with a fierce glare. It let out a bone-chilling roar, and before Lucas could react, it was charging toward them, its claws tearing through the ground. "Run!" Isla shouted, grabbing his arm and pulling him along as they sprinted through the jungle. The Karax thundered after them, its massive bulk crashing through the trees like a force of nature. Lucas's heart pounded as they dodged branches and leaped over roots, adrenaline flooding his veins. He glanced back, seeing the creature gaining on them, its jaws snapping dangerously close. "This way," Isla cried, leading him toward a narrow crevice in a rock formation. They squeezed through just as the Karax lunged, its claws scraping the rock mere inches from them. They stumbled into a small cave, panting and exhausted, the sound of the Karax's frustrated roars fading as it stomped away. Lucas leaned against the cave wall, catching his breath as he looked at Isla, his heart still racing. "That was close," he said, his voice shaky. Isla managed a breathless smile. "Welcome to Eden's darker side. It's not all beautiful sunsets and exotic plants." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the close calls settling over them. Lucas felt a strange thrill, a mix of fear and exhilaration. Despite the danger, he realized he had never felt more alive. He glanced over at Isla, who was studying him with an intense, searching gaze. "What is it?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. She hesitated, as though deciding whether to speak. "Lucas, you're different from the others. You're not just here for yourself. I can see it in the way you look at this world, the way you care." Lucas felt a warmth spreading in his chest. "I don't know what it is, Isla, but being here, with you, this place feels like it's changing me. I came here as an explorer, but I feel like there's more I'm meant to do." She nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and sorrow. Eden has that effect. It brings out the best and the worst in those who come here. It's a test of strength, of resilience, of heart. They spent the rest of the afternoon in the cave, waiting for the Karax to move on. Isla showed him how to create a makeshift trap using vines and stones, teaching him the intricacies of survival in a way that went beyond mere survival skills. It felt like she was passing down a piece of herself, a knowledge born from years of solitude and hardship. As night fell, they returned to the shelter, the jungle settling into a peaceful hush. Lucas lay beside the fire, his thoughts swirling with everything that had happened. Isla's words echoed in his mind, and he found himself wondering if his journey here was more than just a random crash landing. Before he drifted off to sleep, he felt Isla's hand brush against his, a silent gesture of comfort and companionship. In that quiet moment, he realized that, despite the dangers and the mysteries that lay ahead, he was exactly where he was meant to be. The night passed peacefully, and as Lucas closed his eyes, he felt a strange, unexplainable connection to the world around him, a bond that was growing stronger with each passing day. Secrets of the Silent Forest. The following morning, the air in Eden was thick with humidity, and a soft mist hung over the jungle, giving it an eerie, otherworldly glow. Lucas and Isla stood at the edge of a dense grove she called the Silent Forest. It was a place she had only hinted at before, describing it as both beautiful and dangerous, a part of Eden she rarely ventured into. "Today, we're going into the Silent Forest," Isla announced, her tone cautious but resolute. Lucas arched an eyebrow, glancing warily at the shadowed path ahead. "Why do I get the feeling this isn't your average nature walk?" She managed a wry smile. "It's not. The Silent Forest is different from the rest of Eden. The creatures there are powerful, some almost sentient. They don't appreciate intruders." "Then why are we going in?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Isla's expression grew serious. "I think you're ready, and there's something there that might help us. a tree called the eldwood. It's known for its sap, which can amplify energy. If we can gather some, it might power a transmitter to send a signal for help. Lucas felt a surge of hope. The prospect of contacting someone from home was almost too good to believe. Yet, as he looked into the depths of the forest, his optimism was tempered by an instinctive caution. "All right," he said, gripping his spear tightly. "Let's get that sap." They stepped into the silent forest, the temperature dropping as they moved deeper under the towering trees. The jungle sounds around them faded, replaced by an unnatural stillness that seemed to press down on them from every direction. Strange, bioluminescent plants cast an eerie glow, illuminating patches of forest floor with a faint, ghostly light. The silence was profound, broken only by the faint crunch of their footsteps on the soft earth. "This place is unnerving," Lucas whispered, glancing around. "Just stay close," Isla replied, her voice barely audible. The silent forest has its own rules. Everything here is connected. Touch one thing, and something else will know. They moved slowly, careful not to disturb their surroundings. The forest was alive with strange plants, their leaves and stems twisting in odd, almost unnatural patterns. Lucas noticed strange clusters of glowing fungi, their light pulsing rhythmically like a heartbeat. Every so often, Isla would hold up a hand, signaling for him to stop as she scanned the shadows, her senses attuned to the slightest disturbance. After a while, they came upon a massive ancient tree towering above the others. Its bark was a deep, rich purple, and its twisted branches stretched toward the sky, covered in thick, moss-like vines. Lucas felt a strange sense of reverence as he looked at it, as though the tree was alive in a way he couldn't quite explain. "That's the eldwood," Isla whispered, her gaze fixed on the tree. "Its sap is what we need." As they approached, Lucas noticed small, amber-colored droplets oozing from the tree's bark, glowing faintly in the dim light. He reached out, but Isla caught his hand, her eyes stern. "Careful. The eldwood doesn't like to be disturbed. We have to ask for its sap. Anything else is seen as an attack." Lucas's brow furrowed. "Ask? You mean, speak to it?" Isla nodded. "In a way. The eldwood is connected to the forest itself. Show it respect and it will respond. But be prepared. It's different." Taking a deep breath, Lucas knelt before the tree, placing his hand gently on the rough bark. He closed his eyes, trying to project a sense of gratitude and reverence, focusing on his intent to use the sap for help, not harm. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, he felt a strange warmth seep through his fingertips, and as he opened his eyes, he saw a fresh droplet of sap forming on the bark. He reached for it slowly, catching the droplet in a small container Isla had brought. "Did it understand me?" he whispered, feeling a mix of awe and disbelief. Isla smiled softly. "The forest has a way of knowing. You've shown it respect, and it's chosen to trust you." She carefully sealed the container, her gaze thoughtful. "You're different, Lucas. Most who come here see only a world to conquer. But you see Eden for what it is." They moved to leave, but just as they turned, a low growl echoed through the trees, followed by a heavy rustling sound. Isla tensed, her hand reaching instinctively for Lucas's arm. "Stay still," she whispered, her voice laced with urgency. From the shadows emerged a creature unlike any Lucas had seen before, a massive feline form with scales instead of fur, its eyes glowing an eerie shade of green. It moved with a lethal grace, its gaze fixed on them as it prowled closer, muscles coiled and ready to pounce. "That's a kerosene," Isla murmured, her eyes locked on the creature. "They're territorial, and we're in its domain." Lucas's heart pounded as the kerosene advanced, its gaze assessing them with a predatory intelligence. His grip tightened on his spear, but Isla shook her head subtly. "Don't move. We're not a threat unless we act like one." They stood frozen, every muscle tense as the kerosene circled them. It sniffed the air, its sharp, scaled nostrils flaring, and let out a low, rumbling growl. Lucas could feel his pulse racing, each second stretching into eternity. Just when he thought he couldn't stand the tension any longer, the Kyrosum snorted and turned, disappearing back into the shadows with a flick of its powerful tail. Lucas exhaled shakily. That was intense. Isla nodded, her face pale but composed. The silent forest is full of tests. Everything here is a reminder that Eden demands respect. They retraced their steps carefully, leaving the silent forest and its eerie stillness behind. The familiar sounds of the jungle slowly returned, and Lucas felt a weight lift from his chest as they moved back into the sunlight. "Thank you, Isla," he said quietly, glancing at her, "for guiding me through that. I don't think I could have done it alone." She looked at him, her gaze softened with a mix of pride and affection. "You handled it well, Lucas. You're learning to see Eden for what it is, alive, interconnected, and powerful. You're not just surviving here, you're becoming a part of it." Back at the shelter, they set up a small makeshift workstation to prepare the elderwood sap for the transmitter. Isla extracted the sap, mixing it with other substances she had gathered from Eden's plants. The sap glowed faintly, its energy almost tangible as it pulsed in rhythm with Lucas's own heartbeat. "It's ready," Isla said, handing him the transmitter. "It should be strong enough to send a signal beyond Eden's atmosphere." Lucas held the transmitter, his hands trembling slightly. This was it, a chance to finally reach out, to let someone know he was alive, that he was here. He activated the device, watching as it emitted a bright pulse, the Eldwood's energy amplifying the signal. They stood in silence, waiting, each second feeling like an eternity. After a moment, a faint, distorted voice crackled through the device. "Distress signal received. Location unknown. Identify, respond." Lucas's heart leaped, a surge of relief flooding him. He held the transmitter closer, his voice steady but full of emotion. "This is Lucas Renner. I'm stranded on an uncharted planet, coordinates unknown, requesting assistance." The static wavered, then the voice returned, clearer this time. "Lucas Renner, signal received. Preparing for long-range assessment. Stand by." As the message faded, Lucas felt a mix of excitement and uncertainty. They had made contact, but it would be hours, maybe days, before help could reach them. He glanced at Isla, whose expression was unreadable, her gaze fixed on the distant sky. "You're going to leave, aren't you?" she asked softly, her voice barely audible. Lucas hesitated, feeling a pang of guilt. "If help comes, I have to. But that doesn't mean you have to stay here alone, Isla. You could come with me. There's a whole galaxy out there, waiting for you." She looked away, her expression distant. "I don't know if I can. Eden is my home, Lucas. It's all I've known for so long. I'm not sure I belong out there." He stepped closer, reaching out to touch her shoulder. "You're more than what this place has made you, Isla. You've taught me so much, shown me how to survive, to respect this world. But you don't have to stay trapped here. You deserve to see what's beyond Eden." For a long moment, they stood in silence, the weight of their choices pressing down on them. Isla turned to him, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear. "Let's see what tomorrow brings, Lucas. Eden has its own ways of deciding." They spent the rest of the evening in quiet companionship, watching the stars as they sparkled above the jungle. Lucas couldn't help but feel a deep connection to Isla, a bond forged through shared survival and trust. No matter what happened, he knew he would always carry a piece of Eden and a part of Isla with him. As night fell and they drifted into sleep, Lucas felt a strange sense of peace. He had come to Eden by chance, but he was leaving with a new understanding, a new appreciation for the mysteries of life. Whatever tomorrow brought, he was ready to face it, knowing that he had found not just a way to survive, but a reason to live. And in the silence of the jungle, with Isla by his side, Lucas knew that this was only the beginning of his journey into the unknown. The echo of freedom. Lucas awoke to the soft glow of dawn filtering through the thick jungle canopy, feeling the weight of yesterday's events settle over him. The memory of making contact with the outside world sent a thrill through him, yet an unexpected ache lingered. Glancing over, he saw Isla seated at the edge of the shelter, her gaze distant as she traced a pattern in the dirt, lost in thought. As he approached, she looked up and managed a small, wistful smile. "Morning, spaceman. Did you sleep well?" Lucas nodded, settling beside her. "I did, but it feels strange, knowing that help might actually be coming." She nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. "I imagine it does." After a moment, she added, "It must feel like freedom." Lucas hesitated, sensing the weight behind her words. "Isla, you could come with me," he said softly, his voice laced with hope. "We could explore together. You don't have to stay here." She looked away, her gaze fixed on the forest beyond, a shadow of conflict darkening her violet eyes. "Lucas, Eden is all I've known for years. I've made it my home, learned its ways, even come to love its dangers. Afraid I wouldn't belong out there." Lucas reached out, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You belong anywhere, Isla. The universe is vast and strange, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's that it's the people we're with who make a place feel like home." She met his gaze, her expression softening, but before she could reply, a deep, resonant rumble shook the ground beneath them. They exchanged startled glances, and Isla's expression grew tense. "That sounded like it came from the ravine of echoes," she said, her voice taut with concern. "The ravine of echoes?" Lucas asked, instinctively tightening his grip on his spear. Isla nodded, already on her feet. "It's a place near here, a vast canyon where Eden's storms often gather, but something must have disturbed it for it to rumble like that." They set off through the jungle, navigating thick undergrowth and dense foliage as they hurried toward the source of the tremors. Isla moved with her usual agility, leading Lucas through twisting trails and hidden paths until they reached the edge of a towering cliff that dropped into a deep, mist-filled ravine below. The ravine of echoes stretched before them, an immense chasm shrouded in shifting mist that glowed faintly with an otherworldly light. Massive rock formations jutted out from the walls, their surfaces etched with strange, intricate patterns. Lucas was struck by the sheer scale of it, a natural cathedral carved by time and nature, its depths echoing with faint, haunting sounds that seemed to whisper secrets from ages long past. "What is this place?" he asked, awestruck. Isla gazed into the ravine, her eyes reflecting a deep reverence. "The Ravine of Echoes is one of Eden's oldest places. It's said that the storms leave behind memories, echoes of those who lived here before, if you listen closely enough." She hesitated, glancing at him. "It's also a place of testing. The bravest among us would descend into the ravine, hoping to hear the secrets of Eden itself." Lucas looked down into the swirling mist, feeling a strange pull, an almost magnetic draw to descend into the depths. "Do you think it's safe?" "Safe," Isla laughed softly. "The ravine decides what's safe. But I have a feeling that if we listen closely, we might find answers we didn't even know we were looking for." They began the careful descent, climbing down jagged rocks and ledges, each step taking them deeper into the mist-laden depths. The air grew colder, heavy with moisture, and the sounds around them became amplified, strange echoes bouncing off the rock walls as though the canyon itself was alive. The mist seemed to swirl with purpose, shifting to reveal new paths, guiding them deeper. After a long descent, they reached a wide ledge, the mist thinning just enough to reveal a large, stone platform jutting out from the canyon wall. Strange markings covered its surface, glyphs and symbols that pulsed faintly with a soft, bluish light. Lucas ran his hand over the stone, feeling its rough texture beneath his fingers. These symbols, they look ancient, like they were carved by someone who knew this place intimately. Isla knelt beside him, studying the markings with a mixture of awe and sadness. These were left by those who came before, explorers like us. They believed that if you could understand the language of the ravine, you'd gain knowledge and wisdom beyond our understanding. A faint hum began to fill the air, a low, resonant sound that seemed to come from within the stone itself. Isla's eyes widened. It's an echo. The ravine is speaking to us. The hum grew louder, and Lucas felt a strange sensation washing over him, like waves of energy pulsing through his body. The sound seemed to carry memories, images flickering in his mind, visions of explorers descending into the ravine, of creatures he had never seen, of Eden's landscapes stretching out into the horizon. Then he saw something unexpected, a glimpse of Isla, younger and alone, her face etched with sorrow as she wandered through the jungle. The vision shifted, showing her first encounter with the creatures of the silent forest, her first time learning the art of survival. Lucas felt her loneliness, her fear, and the deep, quiet resilience that had kept her going all those years. The vision faded, and he turned to Isla, who looked shaken, her gaze fixed on the stone. "You saw it too, didn't you?" he asked gently. She nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "The ravine shows us pieces of our past, things we've hidden, forgotten, or chosen not to face. It's as if Eden itself is reminding us of who we are." Lucas reached out, taking her hand. "You've been through so much, Isla, but you don't have to face it alone anymore." She looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude and something else, something deeper, a connection forged by shared trials and unspoken understanding. "Thank you, Lucas," she murmured, squeezing his hand. "For seeing me, for understanding." A sudden roar echoed through the ravine, breaking the moment. They turned to see a massive, shadowy figure emerging from the mist, its eyes glowing with an unnatural, fierce light. The creature was unlike anything Lucas had encountered, a giant beast with scales that shimmered like obsidian, its long, spiked tail lashing back and forth as it advanced. "That's an Etherian," Isla whispered, her face pale. "They're rare, powerful guardians of the ravine." Lucas tightened his grip on his spear. "Any chance it'll just let us pass?" "Not likely," she replied, her voice tense. "Etherians are fiercely territorial. It thinks we're intruders." The Etherian let out another deafening roar, charging toward them with surprising speed. Lucas and Isla darted in opposite directions, narrowly avoiding its lashing tail. Lucas felt the ground shake as the creature's claws dug into the rock, leaving deep gouges in its wake. "Lucas, aim for its eyes," Isla called, dodging another swipe of the creature's tail. "It's the only vulnerable spot." Lucas nodded, his mind racing. He waited for an opening, watching as the Etherian's head swung back and forth, its glowing eyes locked onto Isla. Summoning all his courage, he hurled his spear with all his strength. The spear flew through the air, striking the creature just below one of its eyes. The Etherian let out a furious, agonized roar, thrashing wildly as it staggered back, its movements erratic. Seizing the opportunity, Isla retrieved Lucas's spear and leaped onto a nearby rock, launching herself toward the creature's other eye with a fluid, practiced motion. Her aim was true, and the spear struck, embedding itself deep within the creature's second eye. The Etherian collapsed with a final, shuddering growl, its body going still. Lucas rushed over to Isla, his heart pounding as he helped her to her feet. "Are you all right?" She nodded, catching her breath. "Thanks to you. That was incredible, Lucas." They stood in silence for a moment, catching their breath as the ravine settled back into its eerie quiet. The Etherian's body lay still, its form blending into the shadows as though it had always been part of the ravine. "Come on," Isla said softly, gesturing toward a narrow passageway beyond the platform. "There's something I want to show you." They walked deeper into the ravine, the path twisting and turning until they reached a small hidden alcove. In the center of the space stood a pool of clear, luminous water, its surface shimmering with a strange, soft light. "This is the pool of memory," Isla explained. "It's said that if you look into it, you can see the future you desire most clearly." Lucas approached the pool, gazing into its depths. For a moment, the water remained still, reflecting his own image. But then, slowly, the reflection began to change. He saw himself standing in a vast, open landscape, with stars glittering in the sky above him. Beside him was Isla, her face lit with joy as they gazed at the universe together. He felt a surge of warmth, a sense of hope that transcended words. He turned to Isla, who had been watching him closely. "I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want you to be part of it, Isla. I don't want to leave you here." Isla's expression softened, her eyes filled with a mixture of longing and uncertainty. "I don't know if I can leave Eden behind, Lucas, but maybe I can learn to trust something beyond this world." They left the ravine together, the weight of the experience settling over them like a quiet revelation. Lucas knew that whatever happened next, Eden had changed him, had shown him a depth of connection he hadn't realized was possible. And as he walked beside Isla, he felt a bond that transcended words. A bond forged not just by survival, but by the echoes of freedom, of love, and of a future that, for the first time, felt truly boundless.